collaborating with us tonight for the City of Neptune Beach's first virtual design charrette. It takes courage to be open to trying new things, and we applaud everyone for embracing the new, to actively shape a deliberative community process to maximize the quality of life for the City of Neptune Beach. Thank you.
Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Victor Dover, and I'm going to walk you through the introduction here for how we will begin tonight's meeting. And then you'll hear also from Louisa Leche momentarily. First, to preserve bandwidth during this first part of tonight's event, please turn off your camera. I have my camera off at the moment. If you use the stop video button down at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we'll begin momentarily. Okay, so just bringing up the first of the slides. And this is just to let you know, tonight is the charrette starter night for a week of events that will lead to the creation of the Neptune Beach Community Vision Plan. Here's the question you should ask yourself before we start. Have you ever wondered what you could do to make your town get better and better as it grows and evolves over time? And participating tonight and through this important week is one really good thing you can do to get just that to happen. If you work with us and participate, you can make a difference in the world. You can make a difference in Neptune Beach. And you don't have to be an elected official. You don't have to be an engineer or a city planner or a big landlord or a real estate professional. This week, everybody, you can make a difference and help shape the future of the city. Let me explain how. For those who just joined us, looks like a few more people have. My name is Victor Dover. I'm a town planner and urban designer. Our firm, Dover Cole & Partners, is working for your city to shape an updated vision for Neptune Beach with your help. And we're going to make big strides on that together this week. First, some logistics. As a reminder, tonight's online event is being recorded. I just want everybody to realize that that's happening. The recording has already begun. If you're not comfortable being recorded, but you just like to watch and listen, you can remain muted and keep your camera off. And for those who have just joined us, we're asking you might keep your camera off anyway during this first part of the meeting, just to preserve bandwidth. So the recording has begun. Now, if you know someone who will be interested in all of this, but they couldn't join in live tonight, that's no problem. Just urge them to go tomorrow morning to NeptuneBeachVisionPlan.com to watch the recording. And so I'll show you exactly what to do when you get there tomorrow morning. This is a snapshot of the website at NeptuneBeachVisionPlan.com. And the page is organized by day for this week in what we call the Virtual Charrette Hub. So you just scroll down and there's a section for each day this week. So you can see on your screen right now, it says Monday on the left side. The recording will be right where it says just now, it says join the live meeting. But tomorrow it will say the video link or to watch the recording, click here. So you just scroll down to there, click and watch. Now, during tonight's Zoom event, if you need any help or you want to ask a question, or if you're having trouble hearing or seeing the images, or you want to make a suggestion before the mic's open, or if someone's being disruptive at any point, you can use the chat function. So in Zoom, you just go to the bottom of your screen and you mouse over the bottom of your screen, a bar of controls will appear, and one of them says chat. You just click on that and type in your question or comment. And Louisa Leche and Brenda Diaz from our staff will see it, and Louisa and Brenda will keep us on track. The chat is also recorded, so you can just, if you want to drop off an idea and move on to something else, that's fine. We'll get just that way. Now, let me explain how tonight will work. This is our agenda on the screen right now. First, we'll cover some basic background to catch folks up, explain how this week fits into the bigger timeline. Let's see, bumped out there. Just a second. Should be right back up. Okay, good. So one of you who have your monitors on, or Christina, if you're unmuted, or CDD, let me know that you can see the agenda screen. Just let me make sure that that's showing as it should be. Okay. So what will happen tonight is that first we'll cover some basic background. We'll catch folks up who might not have been in one of the previous meetings. We'll explain how this week fits into the bigger timeline of the overall project and how you can remain involved after tonight. Then Louisa will conduct a short, quick live poll of tonight's attendees. I think we're only going to do one, but let's just see if we need to. We'll bring up a second poll later in the meeting. At that point, you'll be hearing from Louisa Leche. She's project director from our firm who's managing this effort. And she'll cover what we heard already since January on this project. And as I said, if necessary, conduct a second live poll. Then the really interesting part comes because Louisa will be sorting us. She'll sort our larger gathering into smaller discussion groups. Zoom lets Louisa create virtual breakout rooms as if we were in a conference. And in those, your cameras and microphones will switch on. We'll dig into maps, we'll mark them up, we'll tackle questions. It'll be fun and probably a little noisy, so just get ready for that. But that's all part of the creative process. And then for the wrap up, Louisa will close the breakout rooms, and we'll all be automatically swept back into the General Assembly for a summary. So that's how tonight is going to work. Now, in the breakout rooms with you, each group will have a facilitator chosen from among city staff, volunteers, and the planners, urban designers, architects, and engineers from the 3 firms that are collaborating to produce your plan. Those firms are ours, Dover Cole & Partners, WGI, and they have personnel both from Jacksonville and West Palm Beach, and Rick Hall, our transportation engineer from Tallahassee. For those who are curious to know more about who we are and how we do all this designing in public work, take a look at dovercole.com. You'll also find links there to write directly to me and Louisa via email. Now, I mentioned that this week's events are part of a larger timeline. As many of you will remember, we started back in January, then came back to Neptune Beach for a series of so-called traveling workshops focused on different parts of the city. And now, we're now moving into the second step in creating the vision for Neptune Beach. That's the charrette shown here on the arrow going across your screen in light blue. After this week, we'll be drafting up and revising the documents. So there'll be plenty of time and many chances for you to give feedback and help to perfect the vision. Now on your screen now, you should see a schedule for this week that begins with April 13th. At the top of your screen, it says Virtual Charrette Key Upcoming Events. And Louisa, if I'm getting ahead of the slides at any point, you just unmute and let me know. This shows on the calendar times when you can join in live and watch recordings if you like, and give input on your schedule. All this is at www.neptunevisionplan.com/virtual charrette. It's a long name, but it's very easy. Just go to Neptune Beach Vision Plan and you'll see the links. A couple of things to note. On Wednesday, we'll have a live online meeting to work on the intersection of Penman Road and Florida Boulevard in particular. And on Friday night at 6 p.m., that's at the bottom of your screen, April 17th, we'll reconvene for a work in progress presentation to review what we came up with this week as a rough draft. Now for both of those, please pre-register online so we'll know how many, like you did for this one, so we'll know how many folks to expect. But again, if you can't attend live, that's okay. It'll all be recorded and posted for watching later. The vision plan I've been talking about is the foundation, the first of 3 big steps we'll take together over the coming year. The vision comes first, and this is the most exciting part. We're asking you to use your imaginations and picture what the city should ideally be, taking into account the realities of what's on the ground, what you can't help noticing, and including, for sure, what needs to be carefully preserved. Then we have 2 much more technical but legally necessary steps to put your vision into action and give it the force of law. So step 2 is revising the city's state-mandated comprehensive plan and updating the city's land development code. That's the zoning. Along the way, there will be a whole series of public hearings required by statute. You'll have plenty of additional chances to be heard before anything official happens. But one shouldn't just jump in to zoning rewrites and small technicalities. First, we need consensus. You need to choose your future. That's the guide star. So our job first is to help Neptune Beach visualize and then implement the future it wants. At the same time, we need you to get us up to speed. The Neptune residents and business people and institutional leaders need to give the consultants everything you know about your town and what it needs to be. So those of us who do this kind of living for, this kind of planning for a living, as professionals, will be working with you, and we will give you and your elected officials tools and information and best practices, ideas about what works. If you're wondering, just let me say, we won't be bashful. If citizens push for something that actually isn't workable or is internally contradictory, or if they miss something crucial, we'll gently and diplomatically point that out. But just remember, having the conversation alone among yourselves will bend the trends, because everybody learns in this process. Now, you've probably heard this word charrette a few times, and just to describe what it is when we do it an in-person charrette, we tend to get lots of people together to touch the map and work in small groups and begin just that kind of conversation. So in an online charrette, like the one we're doing tonight, we do the same thing. So here's an example of a map. We have lots of people interested, so we'll be breaking the larger assembly down into smaller working groups. We'll just do the same thing in Zoom that we would do if we were all in the room together, without social distancing or physical distancing. So what you're seeing here is an example of a map where within the computer, we can modify it, we can mark things down, we can also answer live questions, and the answers to those questions will be gathered up where Louisa can see them, and she'll tell us what they say at the end. Now, this is not instead of traditional forms of feedback like public hearings. There will be lots of that. This live conversation that I'm describing isn't the only channel for giving us feedback. If you're shy about speaking in public or into these microphones and computers, or you think of more things later on that you want to bring to our attention, there are several other ways, including the chat with a planner button on the website. You can just click on that and send your message directly. One of us will be getting right back to you. There are interactive maps where you can pin a comment. There are more surveys, and more of that in a moment, and more polls. So you can promote all these to your networks and your friends. Now, about the polls. We posted a survey with about 45 questions, all sorts of questions about the future. And a couple of them, or several of them, were just yesterday. We were given an alert that they felt like they were badly worded. And I'll take credit for that. We should have proofread them more carefully and thought about that. But I don't want to mislead anyone. We've closed that poll so that if you had qualms about the way the survey was worded, I think maybe about 4 questions out of the 45 had some doubts raised about them. Don't worry, that is not over. We've just paused the survey. We're going to pour over the responses that we got to all 45 questions. Remember, I think at last count, about 256 people had already filled out that survey. So we'll still look it over. We'll take into account the late-breaking feedback we got about the flaws in the survey. We'll fix it. And then when the time is right, we can bring that back on. So if you're worried about that, I want to put your fears to rest. That shouldn't be a problem. Now, meanwhile, if someone's not connected via computer, or if they don't have a smartphone, the question has been asked, what about them? And so that's a great question. We'll be providing the city staff with a rotating exhibit of sketches, images, and other items they can make available. So if you know someone who needs a hard copy, for example, the city staff can print it out with gloves on, have it delivered in plastic. And so that someone's shut in but really cares about this, but doesn't have access to the computer and can't participate tonight, there's no reason for them to feel left out. We'll make sure that they have hard copies they can look at, or something has been posted on the window of City Hall or the equivalent. So just please let us know if you know of someone in specific. We have received some comments by email from people who say they are concerned about those who don't have access to a computer. So obviously the person who sent us emails has access to a computer, but there may be someone else. Don't let us miss them. There are just more ways than ever to provide feedback. So Louisa, I might need your help getting the slides to continue advancing. There we go. I'm just about to the end of my prelims there, but I want to say one more thing about how the process will work. After tonight, we have a lot of work to do this week at home. Although our staff is working from home, we're working together all week, and we'll be drawing maps and making illustrations. We'll be writing, doing some of it by hand, some of it with our computers or our tablets. That's a picture of Louisa working on another past project in just that way. So when we get back together Friday night, we'll have a lot of stuff to look over together. And you can help us sort the most interesting ideas to the top of the pile for more refinement. After this week, what happens next is we'll compile all that into a digital and hard copy booklet, the vision plan. So more people have joined us during the introduction, so I will turn it back to Louisa to get us all started with a live poll and more instructions.
Thank you, Victor. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. And we're going to get started with our first poll here. This is just to get a feel of who is in the room. So there are 5 questions in this poll, and I am going to launch it. And so 3rd Street, 25% in the central Neptune Beach area between Penman and 3rd Street, 18% west of Penman, and a couple who live in the Greater Beaches area or in Jacksonville, and a couple from out of town who may be our cable facility. How long have you lived in Neptune Beach? All right, so we have a huge amount. About 1/3 of everyone here has lived here for more than 20 years, and several more between 5 and 20 years, and a couple of newcomers as well. We asked people what their primary interest in Neptune Beach was. Like most people live here, although there's a big percentage that both live here and work or own property here. Age, we have about 16% between 25 and 34, 30% between 35 and 49, 36% 50 to 65, and 18% that are over 65. That's a pretty good spread. So we've also asked if any of you attended the previous meeting. So it looks like 65% said yes and 35% said no. So we do have some new people to the process, so welcome and thanks for sharing. And thanks for coming and sharing your ideas with us. So now I'm going to end the poll, and we can keep going. So I'm going to start with what we've heard so far. We've already gotten some great feedback from the last set of workshops. For those of you who are new, again, welcome. I'm also going to quickly summarize some of what we've heard from the community. So in February, we held a 3-day series of traveling workshops. In the morning, we went on guided tours, including a bicycle tour with some of your city staff and elected officials. Then in each evening, we had a short presentation and a series of interactive exercises with the community. We also had the opportunity to do a workshop with 7th and 8th graders at Fletcher Middle School. The students had a chance to do a very similar exercise to the one that we're asking you all to participate in tonight, and we had really great ideas come out of that. This is the map that actually shows the 3 neighborhoods that we visited and held the workshops in. While we were in each neighborhood, we asked them to describe their neighborhood in 1 word, how it is today, and also in 1 word, how they see it in the future. So here's a summary of what we heard at those meetings. Today, west of Penman is family-oriented and beautiful with water access and lots of opportunities. Central Neptune Beach is the low-density residential neighborhood that is safe and charming. Old Neptune Beach, the area that is largely east of 3rd Street, is a quiet, cool, and eclectic neighborhood, though there are some flooding issues and some feel it's in flux. In the future, the area west of Penman should stay family-oriented and beautiful, but also be walkable, bike-friendly, and more integrated with the rest of the city. Central Neptune Beach should stay low density and peaceful, but also be more walkable. For the neighborhood east of 3rd Street, they also want to see the neighborhood preserved, charming and quaint, but with better infrastructure. So we had multiple tables set up at these workshops to talk about specific topics. There was a lot of consensus across the 3 neighborhoods regarding housing types. all of them liked single family, granny flats, courtyard bungalows the best. The least popular options in terms of housing across the three neighborhoods were multifamily apartments, small multifamily and larger multifamily apartments, and the second version of townhomes that you can see on the lower right-hand corner. In terms of commercial uses and building types, there was also a lot of consensus. The most popular options across all of the neighborhoods were context-sensitive and smaller scale options like the neighborhood coffee shop, the local restaurant, and the corner store. The mixed-use town center was also very popular all 3 nights. The options people liked the least were the big box and strip commercial, hotels, and office parks. In terms of how you get around, the top choices prioritize safety for all users, and these include multi-use paths, nature trails, and protected mobility lanes. They also like the idea of a privately operated electric shuttle. These shuttles we've seen in a lot of small communities across the country, and they are very successful. A great option for people in these types of neighborhoods. The least popular options were conventional wide arterial streets, what we're calling the conventional vehicular lanes, and electric scooters and mopeds. In terms of civic and open spaces, civic buildings and open spaces, each neighborhood had different preferences and priorities, which is to be expected because the 3 neighborhoods do have different characters and different needs. So in general, there were no options that were widely disliked in any of them. People were pretty positive about most of the different options in terms of civic buildings and open space. So east of 3rd Street, the neighborhood liked these neighborhood squares, pocket parks, and shared streets. Those were the favorites. In the central Neptune Beach neighborhood between Penman and 3rd Street, the senior center was the top choice, along with a neighborhood square and kayak launches. In the neighborhood west of Penman Road, recreational facilities were the most popular. So that includes kayak launches, the beach boardwalk, and a marsh walk. The senior center was also a popular option in that. So in addition to talking about housing and commercial uses and civic buildings, we also had a table dedicated to stormwater, flooding, and sea level rise concerns. In general, residents' concerns matched FEMA's flood risk maps pretty well. So we felt that the maps that are recording risk actually very much reflected where people were seeing flooding. So this neighborhood input is still being accepted on our website. If you go to neptunebeachvisionplan.com/engage, you'll see that the neighborhood results are updating live, and we're still accepting new survey input. So if you couldn't make it, you can certainly still go to our website and take the survey yourself. So even though we've gotten all this great input, this is still just the beginning of the process, and there's a lot of questions that remain. One question we heard a lot was, isn't Neptune Beach already built out? In this case, we're talking more about a few key redevelopment sites and incremental change over time. This is a draft of our map of what some of those opportunity sites could be. So these are areas where we think there could be change, incremental change over time. So why is this important? Well, even before coronavirus, all over the country, we've seen large shopping centers are struggling. And the very nature of retail is shifting to offer more convenience options and also more authentic experiences. There's now the additional uncertainty of how the COVID-19 pandemic will impact the broader community. In our research, we've come across 2 possible scenarios. There's the severe pandemic scenario where the economy takes a dip this year but recovers quickly, and the protracted slump, which would lead to a more severe economic downturn lasting well into next year. We don't know which one of these scenarios is most likely at this point, nor how wide-reaching or severe the impacts will be. We do know that impacts are already being felt, especially on local businesses. Restaurants, hotels, and shops are facing the highest risk of going bankrupt or defaulting. The Jack's Chamber has already been working to provide resources and information to local businesses. Just as a statistic, over the course of just 3 weeks in March, over 450,000 people in Florida filed initial claims for unemployment. So we don't really understand quite yet what kind of ripple effect that may have on the overall economy and in the region and in Florida specifically, but it's something we're monitoring. So what could the impact be here in Neptune Beach? According to a Moody's real estate analytics report, the impact will be felt across all different real estate types, though retail and hospitality, which includes restaurants and hotels, will bear the brunt of it. The report also details that multifamily apartments are the least likely to be badly affected, not including senior and student housing. Now, this isn't really unexpected, given what was measured after the Great Recession. So how exactly these impacts are felt locally and regionally, again, will of course depend on several factors. The big question for our team and for professionals all over the country who do this kind of work is that, and something we have to keep monitoring through all of this, is do we actually expect to see a lot more vacant lots sooner than we expected? The second more important question is one we've had from the very beginning of this process. And that is, given the changing nature of retail and large commercial buildings, what would you like to see happen in those types of properties instead? And so we asked these kinds of questions in our neighborhood workshops, and we got some very interesting feedback that raised some additional questions for us. So the image on the top of the screen is showing mixed-use apartments. And this image was widely disliked in the neighborhood workshops, while the picture on the bottom, which is a photo of Tapestry Park, a mixed-use town center in Jacksonville, was very popular. What's interesting for us as planners is that these two images are very similar from a land use perspective. They're both 3 stories with multifamily residential and office above ground floor retail. They also have buildings that have been designed in a way that they face right out onto the sidewalk and the street. So why might there be this different response to these 2 images? Well, there are a number of possibilities, including that they have very different architectural styles. The way the street is designed and the landscaping is designed is different between the 2. You can see there's brick pavers on the street and the image on the bottom. It could also be the overall context that the buildings are in. The building on the top seems to be kind of on its own, whereas the one on the bottom looks to be a part of a larger and cohesive town center. It could also be just how we labeled each image. One of them was labeled mixed-use apartments and the other one a mixed-use town center. So we don't have an answer to that. It's just food for thought for you all to think about, especially when you get into your small group exercise. So the point of this whole exercise is really that, and that question I pose is that design matters. What a building looks like and how it's defined in a land development code can be 2 very different things. So think about why you might like the images on the right more than those on the left. The images on the right, that townhome on the top right and the single family home on the bottom right, received much more positive reactions than the ones on the left. So why might that be? Is it the relationship of the building to the street? Is it the placement of the garage? Is it the architectural details on the buildings themselves, like balconies and porches? Is it the variety from one building and the buildings next to it? Or is it even the landscaping? Another question we asked was, were there any housing types that were missing? Despite hearing from some that they are concerned about the impact that density would have on their neighborhood character and the traffic it might cause, this example of a bungalow court was very popular. If parking is addressed adequately and the design is done thoughtfully, there could be options like this, as well as granny flats and duplexes, that add to the character of the neighborhood, not detract from it. This image is actually called, it's from a project called La Bonita Apartments, a historic project from Portland, Oregon from 1929. Design doesn't just matter for homes and mixed-use buildings. It also applies to the places you shop and how you choose to get there. Additional questions for you to consider in your group exercises in terms of these images is where do you think these kinds of places and buildings are most appropriate? where would you like to see the kind of neighborhood scale shopping center shown in the upper right-hand corner? Where is that appropriate? Likewise, where would you like to see a dedicated and separate space for people to ride their bikes and skateboards? I am now going to introduce Lisa Nissensen. She's a consultant from WGI. Let me just unmute her. She is going to be presenting a little bit about what we heard around walkability, bikeability, and transportation.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Awesome. Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you so far for your ideas on walking and biking as a top mobility and design feature. We are now at the point where we're going to focus on design details. And here's 3 bullets that tell the story of how we're focusing in. First of all, should there be more places to walk, bike, and skateboard separate from cars? And then the last bullet, if so, how do we connect a network so that you can easily get within and amongst the neighborhoods, as was mentioned as a preference? And then finally, what do we do about some of these new, small, low-speed electric vehicles? Even if they're not shared, sales are up. Next slide. Next.
There we go.
There we go. We did have some questions for clarification on talking about rights of way and what that means. What we want to make sure we understand is that when talking about the mobility network, we are talking about the public streets, sidewalks, curbs, trails, and bicycles, and not so much private property. Next. And if you want to check where these rights of way are, if you look up in the upper left-hand corner, it says JAX GIS. If you go to that site, you can type in your address to see where the public and the private property lines actually lie. Next. We do also realize that with COVID-19, we still have to move about, and that in the future, we will be reopening. We want to make sure that our plan gives you the best information that we can possibly give you for the near, medium, and long term for mobility and street design. But I do want to point out that anything we do is going to be directed by your officials and by public health experts. We won't set policy, but we will translate into mobility and street design needs. Again, some of those may be short term and some of them for the longer term. Next. These are a couple of ideas we got in research that may actually spawn imagination as we try and look at how to come up with these different practices. In the upper left-hand corner, one of the most popular is closing streets temporarily to allow people to get out and ride because our physical and mental health are still important even as we are stay at home and safer at home. So we'll look at some of those if you'd like us to. I think second, technology companies are really stepping up to help and get workers around. So even though in Neptune Beach there is a high number of people who have access to a car, there are some people who don't or who own a car and may need assistance every once in a while. So even Uber and Lyft are working with redesigns of their interiors to be readily cleaned. And then you also have fleets of e-bikes that are on loan. And I know e-bikes was a popular feature when we were looking at the different modes. You also may have noticed that your delivery habits are starting to pick up as we have to replace trips to the store with online shopping. Some of this too is delivery with automated vehicles. And we expect to see some acceleration in this technology as COVID really demands having contactless delivery. When we're over with this, that technology will still be there, and we want to make sure Neptune Beach is in front of it and ready. And then finally, I'd like to talk a little bit about paid parking programs. We looked into that given Neptune Beach's pilot project just to see how other cities are handling their programs and their pilot projects. And we will, over the next week, be compiling those ideas. Some places are getting rid of fines altogether, while others are trying to adjust. Next. And then finally, with my part, one of the things that we'd like to do is put a resilience lens on what we're developing, because there are so many unknowns. And so what are the types of things that stand the test of time and that can be readily adapted, so that whatever we do can fit the need of the near term, but while working over the long term under a lot of different scenarios. So I really do appreciate everyone and look forward to the small workshops. Lisa?
Thank you, Lisa. All right, well, we've done plenty of talking. Now it's time to hear your ideas. So I'm going to introduce what we'll be doing next are these small group visioning exercises, not unlike the ones we do in person. So we'll start separating people out into groups, and you'll have two main tasks when you're in these smaller groups. You'll be working with the map to start brainstorming some ideas, and you can draw and annotate on the map. You'll also be having conversations, and we'll have a record of all of that, so we can go back and hear what everyone was talking about in each of our different rooms. Your second task will be to try and pick your top 3 ideas. So the goal of that is to help us kind of summarize what rose to the top as the most important in your individual group. So what are the goals of this exercise? The first goal is to identify areas of opportunity and areas of concern. The second goal is to brainstorm ideas for how to improve Neptune Beach. What are things you've always hoped would change or could change, but you haven't seen it happen yet? Let us know what those things are if you want to know. Number 3, we'd like you to envision what redevelopment could look like or should look like in your opinion. What's included, and be specific as you can at this point. Again, nothing is being decided at these meetings. We're still gathering input, and there's new people to the process who have joined us, so we want to hear from you. And then again, like I mentioned, at the end, we'd like you to pick the top 3 ideas that you come up with as a group. So here's a couple of questions to get you started. In case you're unsure, looking at the map, how to really get the conversation going, you can figure out where you live on the map. What route do you take to get to the town center and the beach? Are there any intersections that you think are especially dangerous, or areas or streets that are difficult to cross? Where can you envision there being a new public gathering space? And what should be included in that space? Should it be a place for music, for festivals, for children to be able to play? What should we think about as we're looking and designing at new public space options? Last, an example, which streets do you think should have dedicated spaces for people walking, biking, and skateboarding? So, you know, there's some streets that may be already safe for those kinds of things. They have low volume of cars go slow, but there may be other streets that you want to be able to walk and bike on that don't feel as safe. And so let us know which ones those are. So before we sort you out into your rooms, just a couple of ground rules before you begin. And please read along, those of you who can. And a note also, if you've joined us only by phone, you'll still be able to join a breakout room and hear and participate in the conversation. So a couple of ground rules. Each breakout room will have a facilitator. They will be sharing their screens with the map and the 3 big ideas survey. We've given them facilitator training, so please follow their instructions. If there's a lot of background noise where you are, please mute your mic when you're not speaking. If you have experience with Zoom meetings, feel free to offer help to others who may be having technical difficulties. Some people may be more comfortable, have done a couple of these before, and others may have some questions about how things are working. You'll have a chat in your individual breakout room that you can use to talk to each other, and that chat is private and it's for your room only. So if you want to talk amongst yourselves in your rooms, you can use the chat for that, and we'll have a record of that chat after the meeting. Number 4, very, very important for any public meeting, please be open and courteous to everyone's ideas. We're still in the phase that we're gathering as much input as possible, so everyone's voice is welcome. And the last thing is to have fun. So with that, I am going to check on Brenda. She has been furiously sorting everyone into groups right now, so I'm going to see if she's finished that process and see if we're ready to break out into our individual rooms. So please hold 1 second. I will also go ahead and unmute Victor to see if there's anything he wants to add before we start these exercises. So, I think I can. Okay, I'm checking in on Brenda. See how she's doing. Please bear with us. We always knew it would be a challenge to do this during the meeting, to actually break everyone out from this large meeting of 80 people into smaller rooms. So just one more moment. Brenda, if you can unmute Victor, he probably has a couple. There you are.
Well, I'm not used to being muted. That's true with a lot of you as well. Don't worry, the mutes will come off here momentarily. Thank you, Brenda, for unmuting me. I just want to say this, you know, in a public meeting in person, like if we were at the city council chambers, or if we were gathered in the school cafeteria for a working session of this kind, we would ask each person to introduce themselves and use their real names. So we use the same rule when we do engagement with citizens and work in small groups online. So if you have a funny handle, like, you know, the name that you've put into Zoom is not your real name, things like that, go ahead and tell us your name. And at the beginning of the work in these breakout sessions, the first thing we're going to do after recording the number of our breakout room at the top of our list is go around and let each person introduce themselves. So we'll take maybe 5 minutes to do that. So you'll have 30 or 40 seconds apiece. Don't give a long speech, but it would be great to say your name, so we'll have that for the record. And also, you know, you can express a reason why you're there, why you're here tonight, or something you hope to learn from this process. Again, when you do those self-introductions, we'll take turns. So the facilitator will call on you one at a time, because that way everybody's not talking at once. When you're in the breakout room, you'll be unmuted, but we'll still need to take turns so people can hear one another. So we're going to ask the facilitators to call on each person that's on the list of participants on the side of their screen and give you a chance to introduce yourself and explain what you're excited about, what you're worried about, what keeps you up at night, or why you're joining in on tonight. So what's happening right now while I'm explaining that is we're being invited to go to our breakout rooms, and I get to go to breakout room number 1. So I will see you there shortly.
Park traffic calming complex all in one.
So beautification and traffic calming all in one.
Yeah, you know, if you did one of those roundabouts like they do up around in Yulee, I mean, it would be absolutely beautiful over there, and it would solve the traffic problem. And when I come driving down Penman, like let's say on a Sunday morning, and I just ran out of milk, so I run up to Winn-Dixie and then I grab some milk, I can sit at that.
Yeah, that whole housing area, yeah, right in there. The only way the students can get over to Fletcher, either middle or the high school, is to run across Penman Road, dodging traffic, to get to the sidewalk that is on the west side of Penman.
Yeah, because the sidewalk ends like right here or something. So you have a sidewalk for this portion, but this whole south part here doesn't have one, right?
There's no sidewalk. Let's see.
And, you know, trying to cross 3rd on your bike or on foot, it's a challenge. So I don't know how do we develop those blighted properties without, you know, increasing so much traffic? Or can we do some kind of traffic calming on 3rd Street?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely an idea that we can explore. So, you know, see how to make it easier to cross. And
color here, but you know, like this is sort of this focal point up here, you know, town center, but it really lacks a sense of arrival. You know, I think there needs to be sort of a gateway, you know, because it's like you're on Atlantic here and it looks like your typical suburban strip center development pattern that's similar to, you know, in town. You know, it doesn't look any different than if you're going down towards Regency. And then all of a sudden you're driving, you know, and you have the big vacant.
Also, I think up where you type, you need more informational sign about what the building is for. I would put something about availability or ability to rent, you know, something like that. I think is really what we're.
Like how to rent it?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. For a birthday party or whatever you wanted to rent it for, the cost and the deposit.
Okay, that's kind of probably a website thing, but you're right. There needs to be better
to speak of. So if you have company or you have guests in your house, then they can come and park in front of your house on the street. So the biggest issue that I have with west of 3rd Street is all of these, what I'm gonna call marshlands, and every year it seems like that we fill in some more marshland and build more houses on it. And that's causing a lot of our flooding and water problems.
All right. Hello, everyone. I'm going to share my screen again. It looks like everyone is rejoining the bigger meeting. Thank you all so much. Let me just make sure. All right, now everyone will be joined. The timer just ended. All right, wonderful. Welcome back. I hope you had some interesting conversations. We're going to take just a few minutes to hear from some of you all in your different rooms, hear what some of your big ideas were. So first, we can see just a very quick high-level picture of some of the things people were talking about in the different rooms. Looks like we had a lot of first big ideas that were about streets, trails, transportation, and parking. Also, a lot of people talking about public space and parks and recreation. That's what you can see in the yellow color. Again, for the second big idea, streets, trails, and transportation was a big, big one. In the third big idea, there's also about 15% that talking about stormwater infrastructure and climate. And then for the third big idea, a lot of folks talking again about streets, but also other, so maybe we can hear what that was. So I'm going to call on a couple of the spokespeople who proudly volunteered to be heard. So this is going to be at random, essentially. Let's hear from Peggy from group 14. I'm going to unmute you, Peggy, so give me just 1 second while I do that right now. Find you. Oh, I don't see you. Perhaps you used a different participant name. Let's see. I'm going to see if I can find you. Or while I look for you, I'm going to call on Jen and Scott from group 4. Maybe Jen Betcher? I've unmuted Jen Betcher, if that is Jen and Scott. Is that Jen and Scott?
Perfect. Yes,
Wonderful.
we're here.
Thank you for proudly volunteering. If you wouldn't just take a minute to kind of summarize some of what you talked about in your group.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, so a couple of the key ideas we had, one of them that came up was 3rd Street, sort of the walkability crossing 3rd Street. Those that live west of 3rd, you know, it's definitely dangerous to cross 3rd Street, and there's not really many good options, streets to cross. A lot of people wait long for lights. So improving that was a key idea for us. We also talked about City Hall in the town center, potentially moving City Hall for a better use of that land. That's a great commercial space. It may be better utilized. Maybe moving City Hall west of 3rd Street.
Where Jarbo, near Jarbo.
Yeah, near Jarbo was an option discussed. The other thing was 1st Street, maybe a better usage of 1st Street. I mean, anybody who's walked on 1st Street in the last few weeks, they know that people are using it as almost like a boardwalk, and it's not really used for vehicles. So there may be a better option, but you have to take into concerns people who live east of 1st Street. That would restrict access potentially for getting to their home. On 3rd Street, some office buildings and apartments, they could potentially be updated. So maybe some better options for that area, for the office areas along 3rd Street.
The Kmart.
And the Kmart area kind of goes along with that. So the best commercial development, mixed use development. And then stormwater regulations. So, flooding is a problem. There's a lot of lots that have a lot of concrete, use 90% of their lot. So maybe a better use of engineered materials to improve pervious areas. So that was it. I think that kind of represented what we talked about.
That's great. Thank you guys so much. We really appreciate it. So I'm going to now give Peggy from room 14. I found her. Her name's Margaret. She goes by Peggy. So I'm going to unmute you, Margaret, and give you a chance to share what your group talked about as well. So hi.
Hello. So I don't see. There you are. Okay.
Yes, so I can hear you. So everyone is hearing you. Feel free to share.
Good. All right. So what we talked, out of the 3 of us, 2 of us live east of 3rd Street. And even Lauren, who lives west of 3rd Street, we all agreed that we need bicycle racks all along the streets that run east and west, so that people who are coming from the other side of 3rd Street have places to park their bicycles to go to the beach. We felt very strongly about that. And we also had the idea that 1st Street needed to be much wider. So if you combined 1st Street the way it is and took in the sidewalks on either side, you could then divide the street in half, and half the street could be a one-way for vehicles, for cars, and then the other side would be a pathway for bicyclists, skateboarders, walkers, runners, and that way cars would not be interfering with people on skateboards and rollerblades or bicycles. That was another idea that we had. And the other area we talked about was the Kmart shopping center. None of us wanted apartments. None of us. We all wanted it to be residential, owner occupied, 2 cars, required parking per residence, unchangeable, had to be, and then it could be mixed use with commercial space below, but heavily landscaped. We were very big on landscaping. So those were our 3 main areas. And also even in the Kmart area, that maybe there could be a concert area where we could have a venue for musical performances, or even a large pool for people to use as practicing for swimming.
Great.
So those were the main ideas that we had.
All right, wonderful.
Oh, wait, I forgot. We had one other thing. None of us wanted paid parking. None of us wanted paid parking. We felt like that the owner of town center needs to be in charge of his own town center. He owns all the property. He rents it all out. He makes his own money. He can take care of the parking. That's his problem. It's not the problem of all of us who live around here.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Thank you
Okay.
so much, Peggy.
You're welcome.
Thank you for joining. So next, I am going to call on, just so you all are ready, I'm going to call on Mary from group 1, then I'm going to call on David from room 16. So let me unmute you. All right. Should be able to unmute Mary from group 1. Oh, sorry. There you go. Okay.
Okay. Hey, thanks.
Great.
All right. So the ideas that came out of our group were creating a creating a pedestrian-only portion of Beaches Town Center. So imagine if you were to look at the Beaches Town Center and sort of zero in on a particular location, and probably Atlantic Boulevard in between Ragtime and Hawkers, that area, and maybe going a little bit south of that area, maybe the parking lot of Meza and behind Hawkers parking lot. This was if we had a wand and we could wave it and say, this is what we'd like to see.
Mm-hmm.
A pedestrian only area, and that area, instead of being black asphalt with cars on it, it becomes area for us to walk, enjoy, and there's a venue for for a little amphitheater, or just an area for courtyard, something similar to Southern Grounds. So if you think about Southern Grounds, everybody loves Southern Grounds, and if you can expand that idea and go and make a pedestrian only area, yeah, I know that creates problems with cars, but I think there's solutions to that. How do you move cars out of these areas, move them somewhere else? But that's a different discussion. So that's one idea. And that's also safer when you have pedestrian only area. You think about how dangerous it is to cross over Atlantic Boulevard. Let's say you're going from the North Beach. That's a dangerous area. It just is. It doesn't matter whether it's day or night. And it gets later at night, it's more dangerous to cross those streets. So the second thing is, and all these sort of overlap. The second thing is big public spaces. Think piazzas, think trees. Think this is more in the category not of the Beaches Town Center, which was the first recommendation, but this was more in the sort of parks and outdoor public spaces. So think about if you've ever been to a country or city that has town piazzas. This was an idea. So with trees, a place where people can come and congregate and socialize and meet. And thirdly, we talked about having something similar to what we had before, which was a trolley. It needs to be air conditioning, and it would be frequently circulating. There's some thought that the trolley should be coming back and maybe improved upon and circulating more often and going to different locations. So we think that would drive the economic development, just giving us more ways to get to the businesses. And finally, we felt like the commercial development needs to stay commercial because we, quite frankly, need it. When this town was designed, it was planned with commercial and it had an X population. That population has exponentially increased, and we need our commercial spaces. And we know that there's 1,200 apartments being built within 2 miles of us or 3 miles of us. We want to make it like the intercoastal. So we really feel like we need our commercial development. And that's it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mary. Thanks so much. So next is Mike. So before I unmute Mike, because I think Mike will have to be our last person to present today, we are well over time, but I think it was very much worth it. If everyone wants to or share their cameras or turn on their cameras so we can get a photo of this momentous occasion, historic, of everyone who's participated. If you're comfortable with it, please do so. And with that, Mike, I'm going to, oh, sorry, not Mike. What am I saying? David. David from room 16, unless you have a different name that you used.
A code name.
That's happened in a couple of ours. Anyone from David's room knows what name he registered as? And if not, I'm going to, spur of the moment, call on someone else. I don't see a David in my list. Nope. Okay, Stephen. Stephen, I will call on you, Stephen, from group 15 to close us out. 15. All right, Stephen, we can all hear you.
All right. We had ideas of 2 parks, one east and one west. And I've heard some of the other groups talk about the east park of First Street, just taking the next step and making that an urban park, like Jen, I think, mentioned earlier. Just basically leaving one side for parking if necessary, but striping the rest, possibly for different methods of travel, because there's intermixing of people on scooters going 20, 25 miles an hour and little kids in training wheels. But just taking that, it's a very special place in Neptune Beach and going next level with it. The other idea we talked about was on the west side of Neptune Beach, getting an access similar to what we have in Atlantic Beach for kayaks and just to get out on the marsh. You'd be able to have an area where people could maybe have a boardwalk or public access to the marsh, which is beautiful in that area of town. And the third idea that there was a lot of passion for in our group was the senior center. It's well known in Neptune Beach that this is in a temporary location, and people really want to see that have a permanent home that works well for the many seniors in our area that services. So the senior center needs to be thought about in the development of this plan, the permanent senior center. And that was it.
Thank you so much. Those are great ideas. We honestly can't thank you all enough. I just want to remind everyone that there's a lot more going on this week. We have our open design studio Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. You can use the chat with a planner function on our website if you have specific questions for us. If one of us can't answer it, we'll direct you to the person that can. Like I mentioned in the chat, we'll go through the chat tonight, and tomorrow we'll actually prepare written responses to some of the questions and comments you may have shared on the chat. We have the Penman Road and Florida Boulevard 5-point intersection workshop at 6 p.m. on Wednesday, April 15th. And then most importantly, we have our work in progress presentation on Friday at 6 p.m. And all these meetings will be recorded. So if you can't make them, that's fine. You can watch them from your house. And we'll have links to surveys that you can give your input and feedback for each specific meeting. I want to thank every single facilitator who took time to do training. This was, like I mentioned, historic for all of us. And I think we got some really great input and great ideas. So we really we're excited to get started and get drawing and start illustrating some of your ideas. Remember, you can follow us on social media for daily updates. We'll be posting things as we prepare them and remind you to check the website and give input on this drawing or this drawing. So stay tuned and share this with as many people as possible. So thank you to the city and thank you to our facilitators. This has been great. With that, we adjourn. Have a wonderful night, everyone. Stay safe.